Story 1. He hit me once. I was gone the next day. I left the ring on the kitchen counter and had my friends come over to move all my belongings out. Story 2. He called me when he was drunk at 3 a.m. and told me that he only asked me to marry him because he did not think he could do better. He denied it happened the next day despite there being a call. Story 3. My friend ended her engagement with her fiancé because it was revealed that he was deceiving everyone. He was an investment banker, a charismatic man who had convinced everyone he knew, family, friends, her family and friends, businesses, anyone he could, to invest with him. He lied about the returns, using a scheme where he took money from one person to pay another. The truth came to light, along with the fact that she knew he was physically abusing her to keep her silent. He was ultimately imprisoned. Story 4. My friend and his ex-fiancée ended their engagement about 4 years ago, 6 months before their planned wedding. Both felt it had run its course and they were not meant to be together. It was one of the most mature breakups I have ever seen. Within 2 months, both had new partners. Fast forward 3 years. My friend and his ex were each engaged to those new partners within weeks of each other. Fast forward to last Saturday. Both got married on the same day to the people they met within months of ending their engagement 4 years earlier. Meanwhile, I have been single this whole time. Story 5. He refused to set a date. Then he refused to make me coffee, even though the pot was big enough for both of us. He just wouldn't make enough for both of us. Then he refused to turn off the giant overhead light in the bedroom when he left for work earlier than me, so I had to get up to turn it off and couldn't sleep a few more minutes. He just didn't like me much after the excitement wore off, and I wanted more than that. He did, however, stalk and harass me for weeks after I broke it off, threatening my job and my housing, and repeatedly telling me he would kill himself or sexually assault me. This seemed like a lot more effort than making slightly more coffee, turning off a light, and not screaming at me. Story 6. He cheated on me and tried to convince me that I was getting the wrong idea about her, that she was just a coworker, and her text of, "I had fun last night," was about them doing inventory at work. Then I found his dating profile. He stopped payment on the rent, threatened to kill me, and called the police on me, saying I was crazy. They did not agree. I remember feeling small and betrayed, but my life turned out to be happy, and I am sure he is still dishonest. Beyond this post, I do not think about him at all. Story 7. I felt like I was his mother. I asked him to help out around the house, made sure he was not sleeping through his alarm for work, set up a chore chart so I was not the only one keeping up with household tasks, apologized to my friends and family for him skipping events because he was sleeping through them, and asked him not to stay up until 3 a.m. playing video games because we had something important the following morning. Story 8. He was emotionally abusive and very dependent. I found out afterward that he cheated on me and had a child with her. He is a doctor and she was the nurse. Story 9. My ex and I were about 6 months away from getting married. Disc jockey, photographer, venue, save the dates. There came a point when she wasn't enthusiastic about the planning, and I knew something was wrong, but I was still stunned when she said she wanted to call it off. She could tell I wasn't ready to start a family like she was, and that I was just going along for the ride. It hurt deeply at first and I struggled for a while, but eventually I felt relief because she was right. I wasn't ready for children. We briefly got back together and ended it again more amicably the second time. 2 weeks after splitting for good, I met the woman I would marry. We're happy and child-free. My ex is a mother of 2 children, divorced, but seems to be doing well. I'm grateful to her now in retrospect. Story 10. I can't speak for myself, but my mom did, in about 1953. She dated Richard through the last 2 years of college and was engaged. Her best friend had a double-blind date arranged, but the other girl got sick, and she asked my mom to go in her stead. Casual dates for going dancing as a group were more common then, and my mom agreed to fill in. She said by the end of the night she wasn't sure exactly what she wanted, but she knew she couldn't marry Richard. She called it off the next day. She married my dad 6 weeks later. She made jokes to me about crossing one name off the invitations and writing in my dad's. No idea how accurate that was, but I do believe they used the same date, and she already had her dress, Chantilly lace according to the article in the paper, and bridesmaids. I did end-of-life caretaking for them 65 years later, and every night before going up to bed, my mom would look up at him, give a big hug and kiss and say, "Thank you so much for marrying me." She absolutely meant it. We had one purely ornamental plant, as my dad was quite practical. A rose bush in direct line of sight of the kitchen window. Story 11. He was always extremely jealous and convinced that I was cheating on him, to the point where I could only leave his sight to go to work. I eventually dropped out of college because it became too much of a hassle to argue every morning. Even when I was at work, I received excessive calls where he accused me of not actually being at work or claimed that my commute taking longer than usual was proof of cheating. Then he became physically abusive. I called it quits, kicked him out, and needed a restraining order. I stayed with various family members until the restraining order took effect. I am very glad that I did not wait it out because at that point I had been holding on to the belief that once we got married, he would be better. Story 12. It occurred to me that we never had one honest fight. If I did something to upset him, he would stew and grumble, and weeks later blow up over something unrelated. I had wanted him to visit me, but he kept saying he couldn't and would not say why. We had graduated college at this point, living in separate cities. I had time off and he wasn't working. I couldn't understand why he wouldn't come see me. I offered to pay for his trip and said he could pay me back if he wanted. But of course, he didn't have to since it would be our money anyway. Still no. It turned out he had a boys' trip to California planned for that week and didn't want to tell me until after he came home, knowing I would be angry and hurt that he didn't choose to see me when he could have. He figured I would forgive him and get over it, as I had always done once he got back. Suddenly, I understood that would be my future with him. I would do something to annoy or infuriate him and walk in a minefield for weeks, waiting for an explosion. He would upset me and then just wait for my forgiveness. A perfect repeat of my parents' marriage. I ended it that day. Story 13. A year after we met, he moved to another country for his dream job, which was only a 2 to 3 year contract. I was still in graduate school, so I couldn't move. We did long distance for 2.5 years. We spent all our extra money on plane tickets. We got engaged while still long distance. I then said I wanted to move to another country for my dream job. By this point, he decided he wanted to take a job back in our original country. Instead of being supportive, he tried to aggressively talk me out of taking the job, complaining, being manipulative, and telling me to take a lower-level position in our home country. In the end, to mentally deal with packing and moving without extra stress, I cut contact with him for 2 months, moved, and started my job. Then we talked and broke up on the phone. I mailed him the ring back and never looked back. Story 14. I ended my very short-lived engagement because of Reddit. I kid you not. I posted in the engagement rings community about hating my ring, and then people started asking questions about my relationship. After discovering that he was much older than me, I realized I was being manipulated. It was mind-blowing. I received so many messages from concerned women that I could barely keep up. At first, I thought everyone was exaggerating, but then I started reading stories and links they sent me and found so much in common. I told him I needed some time to think, and he changed completely, making me realize what a freak he was. I haven't looked back, honestly. I am applying for medical school, and I am so happy I didn't stay with him. Story 15. He was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The life of the party, the nicest guy in public. At home, controlling, gaslighting, verbally and emotionally abusive. He tried to destroy my career and friendships so that I would be reliant on him. But I was the crazy one. I was immature, poor, planning to cheat on him, so he cheated first. He abused alcohol and drugs. But no, that was me. He is on his 5th wife. Story 16. I was 18 and he was 26. He groomed me starting when I was 15. I had gotten pregnant and had a miscarriage. He blamed me and said I had an abortion. I was tired of being alienated from my family and friends. He did not want me to go to college or work. He was emotionally and mentally abusive, and he cheated a lot. He ended up getting married 3 months later to a 17-year-old he met at a club. He tricked her into believing she was pregnant from a one-night stand. Supposedly, she was 2 months further along than he thought, and she married him to get papers. They divorced a year later. He then brought over his first cousin from Honduras, who was also 17. He was in his 30s at this point. He married her in 6 months. They had 2 children and are now getting a divorce because of how controlling and abusive he was. I dodged a bullet. Story 17. He wanted to play video games for 18 hours a day. I had to schedule an hour a day for us to just hang out, and he made it seem like I was an inconvenience. When I said he never wanted to do things I wanted to do, like just go get the mail together, he told me he didn't like the things I did and didn't understand why he had to do them. He also got fired from 4 jobs that year because he preferred gaming. Even his parents started asking why I was with him. I thought I couldn't do better, but I left him, and 7 months later, after starting over, I found my husband. Story 18. He beat me, slammed my stomach first into a sofa, and pinned me to the floor after I had a miscarriage. His family walked in at the end, and it took 2 hours for the police to respond. He was in line to work for the sheriff's office. It was not the first time he hit me, but I made sure it was the last. He then slandered me on social media, and people I thought were my friends took his side. I never said anything about it except in comments like this after I left. Story 19. I really started watching how she treated her parents while she was stressed. I was not impressed. I did not want that in a permanent partner. Story 20. He was a serial cheat and still is. He regularly cheats on his husband of 10 years, with whom he has 2 children. His husband knows he made out with someone at a bar but stayed with him. He openly talks about it with me and shows no remorse. He says he loves his husband but has cheated on everyone he has ever been with. He does not know what love is. I tried to warn the husband, but he blocked me on all platforms. Story 21. He was an amazing man and would have been an amazing husband. At that point in my life, I was a closeted lesbian, and only a cruel person would have gone forward with the wedding. Story 22. He decided to change his career goal 8 months after we got engaged. I had just graduated college 1 semester before he was supposed to and started working as a registered nurse. His plan was to graduate the following semester and begin working in a career related to his degree. A few weeks into the new semester, his career objective became to be a chapter advisor for his fraternity, also known as a professional fraternity advisor. I broke up with him after he accepted the position because it was not the future I had envisioned. He was not ready to leave behind the college lifestyle, and that was fine, but He was not a bad person, and I hope he is doing well now. Story 23. I got tired of her just saying, "I love you," and not actually showing it. Everything was great until it came to her taking accountability, and then it would spiral. She would escalate even the most simple misunderstanding into an all-day grudge match until I got tired and caved. Massive fights over innocuous issues where all her energy was spent trying to prove it wasn't her fault or that it was entirely mine. This got to the point where she would make up things she or I had said to reinforce her side of the argument and try just to win the fight. After so many rounds of just trying to be heard about how much her actions hurt me, and it turning into endless holes of chasing and arguing, I started just saying, "I'm disappointed about blank," and not going to fight about it. Apparently, that was no good either because it made her feel bad about herself, thereby justifying shutting down and throwing jabs instead of trying to understand and solve the issue at hand. Trying to show her how her actions as well as mine led us to the fight ended with, "I won't be spoken to like this," hanging up or walking out, ignoring me for hours, and just reappearing whenever she felt like it, expecting me to feel bad and apologize for everything. Basically, when every mention of your feelings being hurt by their actions turns into a full-on criminal trial, it starts to feel like they value their ego over your connection. Anything you try to build on that foundation is going to crumble. You can't fix things with people who are more focused on blame than solutions. Story 24. Not the right fit for either of us. He had a hard time accepting me for who I am and the way I want to live my life. The way I want to eat, raise my children, run my house, how I want to dress, and so on. I did not have the energy to help him work through all the emotional baggage from his childhood or deal with his focus on appearances, which was extremely high compared to my own, since I really do not care what other people think of me most of the time. Somewhere out there is a woman who is going to make him feel like the luckiest man in the world, but I am not her. Story 25. Her family was overwhelming. She was amazing and everything I wanted, except for the family. I thought maybe it would eventually grow on me, but it bothered me. I had been married before, and she wanted children right away because of our age. I knew there was a high likelihood that I would want to leave and did not want to have children. Story 26. We dated for 4.5 years. Marriage felt like the next step, but I had so much resentment built up. He wasn't very responsible and he drank too much. I was paying all the bills and doing all the house chores. I dreaded our approaching wedding date. I just knew I would spend the rest of our relationship taking care of him. He was the best boyfriend I had ever had at the time, and he was very sweet to me. But I wanted a partner, not a dependent. I went to my dad and broke down and said, I don't want to marry him. And Dad said, then don't. Dad told me if I felt that way, I would hurt him more down the road, hurt our future children, and mostly hurt myself. I'm really grateful that my dad gave me permission to call it off. So I did. I lost a lot of the friend group I had at the time. My ex liked to surround himself with other people who liked to drink and party like him. I liked drinking and partying in college, but at the age of 25, I was growing out of it. I felt kind of gaslit by a lot of them because I was made to be the villain in that relationship. I said to hell with them. He can have them all. 2 years later, I found out that when we broke up, he made up a bunch of lies about me and said I cheated on him and all kinds of stuff I didn't do. Now, there are legitimate complaints about me to be had, but he made up stuff that was completely untrue. It made me question anything he ever told me. A couple more years down the road, he got addicted to methamphetamine and got into some bad stuff. He is in prison now. I really dodged a bullet. I met my now husband when I was 30. He is an engineer, and he supported me in leaving my teaching job to raise my kids full-time. We are now expecting our second child. Story 27. He is a narcissist and let the mask slip too soon. He thought I would put up with it just to be married, but he was wrong. It took me 7 years to pay back wedding debt, but it was a lot cheaper than paying for a divorce from the wrong person. Story 28. I woke up one morning and realized I fundamentally disagreed with how she wanted us to live our future. I quickly realized I had been thinking the wrong way, and that being alone was better than being with the wrong person. Story 29. He was controlling and immature. He wanted to buy video games and CDs rather than paying rent. He emotionally manipulated me to make irresponsible financial decisions. The final straw was when my mom left a stern message on the answering machine saying the bank called her because I was $700 overdrawn. When he told me I had a message, he said, "Your mom called. Haha, you're in trouble." Story 30. My ex-fiancé broke ours off because, and I quote, "I don't love you enough and I'm not attracted to you enough to marry you." At least he realized this a decent time before the wedding, when organization and planning were not too far advanced. Story 31. I was 19 and he was my first boyfriend. Why did I say yes? I still lived at home with my parents and honestly, it wasn't a great relationship. I really feel like he could have turned out to be an abusive partner once it was just the two of us. I ended up moving out on my own and getting an apartment in 2002, when we could still afford to do this at a young age. I got a taste of unlimited and unconditional freedom and had a blast. I told him I wasn't ready to settle down. I felt like I had to live on my own for a while and be an independent adult, and I thought we should pause our relationship, not just the engagement. He started stalking me, calling me repeatedly throughout the day and night, and showing up at my apartment and my job. Then he called my mother and said I was out being promiscuous and hoped she was proud of me, along with other hurtful things. I moved to another apartment in the same complex, but he didn't know the location. I threatened him with a restraining order and called his mother to inform her as well. He stopped after that. He did leave one more tearful voicemail saying he still loved me and would wait for me until I decided to stop being promiscuous. Funny enough, I did not act that way. I dated exactly one more person after him and then married him. Here we are 20 years later. Story 32. He had been gradually emotionally abusing me and degrading my self-confidence for most of our relationship, but when we got engaged, it increased significantly. The final straw was when I confronted him with evidence that he had abused his ex, and he scoffed and said, "It was not physical abuse. I never hit her. I just shoved her into the wall. It was a glimpse into my future. We ended it." Story 33, mine was nearly 20 years ago, but we were heading in different directions in life after a few things suddenly changed. He was moving overseas for a massive opportunity, and though I could have joined him, I was still young, building my education and life, and decided to put myself first. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done. But looking back now, I am incredibly proud of how maturely and kindly we both handled it. All these years later, we are still living on opposite sides of the world, but we are close friends. We are both still single and living our best lives. Every now and then, we cross paths and catch up in person, and it is always a great time. I will love him with all of my heart for the rest of my life, but I do not know what things will look like for us in another 20 years. Story 34. 3 months before the wedding, we had an argument about his drug addiction. He calmly said he was not sure if he still loved me. The man had never been indecisive, so I called off the wedding. Story 35. The wedding was planned for 2020 but was canceled because of COVID-19 lockdowns. I am not from this country, so none of my family could attend. When COVID-19 ended, we had a baby and continued to postpone the wedding. My partner does not want to have wedding photos until she loses the weight she gained during pregnancy. This was years ago, so it is probably not happening anytime soon. I still love her and think she is gorgeous, but it is what it is. We have a registered domestic partnership, and she was the sponsor on my visa before I got permanent residency. Our families consider us pretty much married at this point, so we are not in a hurry. We have been going strong for almost 9 years. Life just got in the way of the wedding. Story 36. I've tried for a very long time to forget it all, but now, as my memory is actually declining, I'm starting to feel, I really don't know. I guess I'm fearful I'll forget it all if I'm not vigilant, and that his memory needs to stay alive in me. It would be a great dishonor to him if I lost it. He is deserving of all honor. We had that mature, supportive, kind, and beautiful love. The kind you experience once in your life if you're ever so lucky. We were so happy together, so the end sent me. His calling in life was to become a father. He told me on our first date. I wasn't sure I even wanted to be a mother, but I figured that's just what you do in life, and that's the tax you pay to live your life at all. I felt like I was being obligated by everyone at every turn. I felt, and still feel, it would have been all too likely that I'd turn out just like my own mother. All children deserve the best we can do for them, and all children deserve to have the unshakable, cellular-level knowledge that the people who are supposed to love and protect them the most actually want to do that. I knew that I couldn't guarantee that for myself, even if I really did want to try for him. For years, he thought he would change my mind. I hoped he would change his mind and let me off the hook. At the time, I wasn't even completely against motherhood. I thought I'd just wind up going along with it, and that my life wasn't my own anyway. But for him, I would have surrendered. He just made me so happy, and I wanted so much to do that for him too. One night, I told him we needed to really get the wedding planning started. And then suddenly, it felt like the air stopped moving. He told me he fully understood that I simply did not have motherhood in me, and he had come to terms with that, but it was the deal breaker. I protested every which way about separating, but he told me that he feared I would ultimately be unhappy, that someday I'd grow to resent him and our children, and that he couldn't live with himself believing he robbed me of happiness. Until right then, I had never felt so truly loved by anyone, and even until today, I've never felt more devastated. So that's what happened. Story 37. His mother basically controlled our relationship. I would be marrying into a family that did not even like me, and she did not stand up for me once. Now, story 38. I felt pressure from my mother to marry. I was in my early 30s at the time. It took 12 months to organize the wedding, and then the invitations went out. At this point, anxiety set in, and I had weeks of sleepless nights. I didn't want to marry. He was a great man. Who was I to take away his opportunity for real love just to appease my mother? So I canceled it all in one fell swoop. I was hated by all. I lived happily ever after. Story 39. Not me, but one of my best friends. She dated a man, and they got engaged on her birthday 10 months into the relationship. They planned to get married the following summer. Because they were Catholic, they did not want to move in together right away, but about 5 months into the engagement, 15 months dating, they finally made the decision to live together. This man was a full-blown alcoholic. She had a bar in the basement, and she found an empty bottle there that she knew was not empty before moving in, and she did not drink. In the 1 month they lived together, he drank half of her alcohol supply. Story 40. My ex and I both had injuries around the same time and became addicted to Vicodin after having too much prescribed by doctors. After a couple of years of addiction and barely making it through, she decided the only way she was going to get clean was to live with her family, about 4 hours away. I didn't want her to go but knew she was right, so I agreed. We planned to continue long distance until we could reunite, but it was much harder than we expected. It was very difficult going from being with each other almost 24 hours a day for 5 years to visiting once a month at best. We drifted apart. Reluctantly, we started discussing taking a break and seeing other people. Even though we agreed, we believed we'd ultimately end up together. Not long after those talks, I reconnected with an old childhood neighbor. The last thing I wanted was to jump into another relationship so soon, as I was still processing what happened with my ex and had a lot to work on personally. I was a walking red flag at that point. I have no idea what this childhood friend saw in me, but I took the leap and began the new relationship. I knew it would devastate my ex, even though splitting up was best at the time. It was very difficult for a long time, but ultimately the best decision I ever made. That former childhood friend is now my wife of 5 years. We have been together 10 years total, and she is the mother of my child. My ex is a mother herself and thriving. We have both been clean from pain pills for several years. Story 41. In the mid-1990s, I dated a friend of a friend. We got engaged and bought a house together before we got married. He ended up abusing me twice. I gave the ring back to try to recover my money from the house. I had to hire a lawyer. To this day, his mother wears my engagement ring as her wedding ring. Story 42. We were due to be married in February. My ex received a scholarship offer last year for her doctorate on another continent while I was struggling with untreated severe anxiety disorder for over 20 years. She wanted to turn down the offer to be by my side. I then proceeded to end the relationship because I knew it was something she always wanted to do, and it meant the world to her. The definition of love differs from one individual to another. For me, it is a sacrifice. It is the paradoxical freedom found in binding your heart to the well-being of someone beyond yourself, where their joy becomes your purpose, their pain your burden, and their growth your sacred duty. It hurts, but I am content. Story 43. Because they wanted to be free to do what they wanted, like get drunk and flirt with other men. After 5 years, that was not possible following a wild, dirty casino trip she took. I have not gotten that close to someone since. I married my craft instead, which was over 15 years ago. It left a bad taste in my mouth. Story 44. In my case, it was because I realized I wanted to share my life with someone, but not with him. Sometimes love is not enough. Story 45. I realized he was a much better person than me and deserved way better. After we broke up, I worked hard on improving my temper and dedicated myself to being a good and kind person. It has paid off, and I am not the person I was 20 years ago. We both moved on and married other people, and I still stand by my decision. Story 46. Well, he cheated on me with his best man. When I caught them, he insisted vehemently that he is not gay. Last I heard, he has a new girlfriend now, so he is still in the closet. Joe, if you are reading this, happy Pride. Story 47. It was like something out of a movie. It was not going to be a big wedding by any means. We were just going to elope overnight. On the day we were supposed to get married, he slipped on the ice, hit his head, and had amnesia. He did not even remember who I was. Thought it was 2025. This was back in 2022. Believed Obama was president and got stuck in a loop. We ended up completely breaking up afterward. I will never forget the shock of it all. It was probably for the best in the long run. We had been barely together before we planned to marry, but it still stung at the time. Story 48. I ended the relationship after he moved his racist sister into our house while I was visiting a friend in another state. Story 49. I was driving over a bridge and thought about how easy it would be to accelerate into the river, so I would not have to go home or feel trapped. This was just a month before our wedding nearly 10 years ago. I am grateful every day that I walked away. Story 50. We were together for 5 years. I think we just got too comfortable with the idea of each other. When it came down to it, I realized we hadn't actually grown, just got used to each other. That is not love. That is the fear of starting over. Story 51. My ex and I got pregnant when we were 18 and 19. We decided on adoption for many reasons. After that, I think he proposed because he felt bad. He cheated on me before the pregnancy, during the pregnancy, left me for a little while during the pregnancy, and cheated on me after the pregnancy. He was physically, mentally, and emotionally abusive. He would pick fights just to see me get upset. It literally brought him joy, and I got him to admit it once. He also liked picking fights because he could drag them on for hours until I did not remember what we were arguing about. Then I would just apologize to stop the argument. I started catching on to what he was doing and realized I was much happier when he was not there. I could sleep without being woken up to argue, and I could be at peace. So I told myself the next time he threw a fit, I would end things. And that is what I did. Now I am happily married to a different man and at peace. Story 52. I was too young to be engaged in the first place. Then I started noticing how he treated his kind mother, with lots of pouting, yelling, and melodrama. I realized that was my future. I have never regretted walking away. Story 53. She was somewhat crazy and made me choose between her or the kitten we had adopted. She had wanted a baby, so we compromised on a cat first. Obviously, I chose the kitten. She was my best friend for her entire life and was treated and loved like the little queen that she was. Story 54. We got engaged because it felt like the next step, not because we were truly ready. Looking back, we were trying to fix a rocky relationship with a ring. The closer the wedding got, the more I realized we were not partners. We were just two people afraid of starting over. Calling it off was brutal, but staying would have been worse for both of us. Story 55. Typical 22-year-old dating a 31-year-old situation. We were both very immature, but at least I had the excuse of being younger and was the one with my own apartment, car, and job. He eventually married a very nice woman with a good job and a nice house, but she has 4 children from another man or men. He seems to really love them all, so I am glad for him. Story 56. We decided to open up our relationship, which was a terrible idea, but we were convinced. Then the trust was broken and it was never the same. We ended it shortly after. In hindsight, that relationship had other big problems, but we were in love, and it is hard to see red flags with rose-colored glasses on. Life goes on, and I am in a much happier relationship now. I hope the same for her. Story 57. We bought a house together before the wedding, and then realized I was marrying an alcoholic. He urinated in the dresser and down air vents. The last straw was when I came home from work and found him drunk and dressed in my panties. I guess you cannot truly know someone until you live with them. He had a steady, well-paying job and never got very drunk when we went on dates or had sleepovers at each other's houses. It was only after we moved in together that things turned difficult. Story 58. His family did not want him to get married. It is as simple and complicated as that. And it was very difficult. I wanted to die for about a year. Then I just woke up one day and moved on. I am currently married, after a few false starts, to the absolute love of my life. If something happened to this man, I would never date again. We have 3 children, 2 cars, 1 house, 1 dog, and an entire lifetime ahead of us. It is not a huge, travel everywhere, White Lotus kind of life, but it suits us both, I think. Last I checked, my ex was still single. I doubt he will ever marry at this point. From this distance, I am actually grateful to him. He made the right choice for himself, and I cannot fault him for that. He also saved me from a lifetime of misery. Story 59. I realized I was staying because I did not have a reason to leave. He was kind, but we both deserved more than that. Story 60. Oh me. Because 6 months after buying our first house and over 7 years together, she told me she had decided she could not live without becoming polyamorous. Story 61. We were living together in a dead bedroom situation for a long time. I eventually gave up trying to get him to want me. He sensed I was mentally checking out, so he proposed. I thought maybe this would spark the old flame, so I accepted. That spark was dead. Story 62. He couldn't keep a job. He temporarily moved in to my parents' couch. My dad got him a job, but he didn't last a week. Somehow he knew my parents had just come into some serious money from a class action lawsuit against Bosch and Loam in the mid-2000s, and I guess he thought he was going to hop on the gravy train. My dad was so against it that he was going to offer me a Benz to call it off. I wish I had known that, or I would have waited 20 more minutes to tell my dad I had called it off. Fast forward to the present day, I got a new job, and surprise, he works there too and has a terrible record. Somehow he got another job at the place I previously worked, and I found out through ex-coworkers that he didn't last 3 months. Old habits die hard, I suppose. I dodged a horrible bullet on that one. Story 63. Called mine off 2 weeks before because he was so rigid about the prenuptial agreement that it was regarded as unconscionable. Instead of trying to work through it, he said take it or leave it. So I left it. I realized at that moment this guy didn't want a partner. He wanted someone he could control and who was convenient. I personally did not matter to him. His mother was also extremely manipulative and awful. I couldn't run faster from that family. Story 64. He told me we would be moving in with his parents and I would be dropping out of college to support him. I was taking 18 credit hours a semester with a 3.6 grade point average. He was taking 8 credit hours a semester with a 1.9 grade point average, having to retake many of his classes. He had been in college for over 8 years at that point. I realized that as attractive as he was, the life he wanted to live was not one I wanted to be part of. Story 65. He wanted exactly what the song Labor by Paris Paloma describes. We were together for 6 years, and he was really sneaky about his abuse, to the point where I didn't fully see it until I left the relationship. While leaving, I finally realized he didn't even know me, see me, or care about me for that entire time. He just wanted a live-in mother, someone to abuse, and someone to have and raise his future children. I'm just glad he didn't try to kill me while I was leaving. Story 66. Ended my engagement after 3.75 years together. The wedding was 3 months away. I spent the whole relationship taking care of his emotional needs, his family drama, and his health issues. He would never express his feelings, and we would have huge fights until he finally told me what was wrong. Then I would feel like a crazy person. All our fights ended with me compromising. He never resolved problems. I am a graduate student currently, and I had an almost impossible semester. I expressed to him multiple times that I felt like I was drowning and needed his support. Nothing changed. By the time the semester was over, I resented him a lot. It still took me another 3 months to have the courage to end things. At the same time, I had given up putting effort into our relationship. Suddenly, he realized I had stopped putting in effort and had a problem with that. I told him I needed to see him putting in effort for me to feel like I should try. Nothing changed. Finally, I told him I was not happy and resented him. I tried to make him see he was not happy either, but he refused to accept it. This does not include how he picked an engagement ring that looked nothing like the design ideas I had given him. It felt like he said, "Forget what you want. I am buying this." He barely paid any deposits for the wedding. Then immediately after we ended things, he told me to give him his money back. Or when we started planning the wedding and he said, "Oh, isn't the bride's family supposed to pay for everything?" As someone who claimed to be very liberal, he had very outdated views on weddings. It has been a few months, and the wedding date we had set will come up in a few weeks. At least I feel like I can breathe. It is more of a relief than anything. Story 67. He developed psychosis following childhood trauma. He turned to alcohol to help with the hallucinations, both visual and auditory, and developed a drinking problem as a result. The voices were initially quite mild. Hearing our neighbor talking to him, then someone climbing up the house to break in, then telling him to kill our cat and to harm me. Then I started finding empty bottles all over the place. He used to put vodka in 500 milliliter Ribena bottles. I still hate the sight of those. We'd sit to watch a film, and he'd finish a bottle every time I was out of the room. At the end of the film, he'd be slurring and nearly passing out, but still insisting he hadn't touched a thing. I remember searching one day and finding 12 bottles all over the house. He'd give me his card, but had memorized the card details. He would order from the takeaway so he could buy alcohol while I was at work. He'd urinate all over the sofa and carpet. I came home a few times in dread because he'd stop texting me. Burnt food in the oven, him passed out in the lounge. He pinched things from the house to sell for cash. He'd chase me to get his card, kick the door halfway in. A few times he'd have seizures because he was withdrawing. I had to buy him alcohol to help wean him off. It was the most devastating, soul-destroying experience ever. Mental health services wouldn't help if he was drinking. He'd stop for a couple of days. He stopped for a few months. He took me on a surprise holiday as thanks for my support. We started hopefully or foolishly planning the wedding, talking about colors and all that. He'd relapse. The day the estate agent came to take pictures of the house, he was passed out in bed. After we broke up, he spent a couple of months urinating all over his rented flat. He was suicidal. He was consuming 3 liters of vodka a day. But thank God, he used the house profits to go to rehabilitation. He has been sober since. Married, has a child, healthy, working. I am so proud of him. I feel sad for the person I was then. I was so desperate. I developed anxiety. I'm not married. I feel lost at times. He dealt with all of it, but it took a huge toll on me too. I was 30 when we ended. I am 41 now. The addict is never the only one. Story 68, he cheated. Then he wrote a now somewhat famous song about our relationship that basically said, "I would have done anything to stay with you. What else would it have taken for you to stay with me? I do not know, but not being unfaithful would have been a good start." Story 69. I was staying over at his place with my son, who was a toddler at the time, and we were supposed to have a date night at home. He decided to get drunk with his friends at the pub next door instead. When he eventually stumbled in at 1 a.m., he knocked things over, then lay in the hallway groaning for a long time. I didn't get up to take care of him, and in the morning his mother asked why I hadn't. I told her he's a grown man who made his choices. If he needs to be cared for, that is her responsibility, not mine. I left because I felt alcohol was becoming a priority, and I'm not going to have that in our lives. Last I heard, he was addicted to alcohol, cannabis, and cocaine. He received a driving under the influence charge in a car he had only owned for a week, and almost everyone got away. I bet his mother is still coddling him, though. Story 70. I am super embarrassed to say I have had 2 failed engagements, both in my 20s. The first was with my high school sweetheart. That relationship was abusive. As soon as I had somewhere else to go, I left. It was straightforward. The second was someone I met shortly after the first. Relationships usually fail for multiple reasons, and looking back, it was a combination of factors. However, the main reason I decided to leave was how much of a sexual pest he was. If I had to choose between the two, I would pick the abuser. Story 71. Ex-fiancé came home drunk after spending the entire day at his parents' house, which was typical. He asked me to use all of my life savings to pay off his credit cards. When I objected, he told me I was not a team player. I told him to leave and moved across the country a couple of weeks later. It was easily the best decision I ever made. His demand finally made me realize the unhealthy relationship he had with his family and the extent of his alcoholism. Story 72. He knew I wanted to get married. After a few years, I said I wanted more commitment and to start living together. His family would get upset if we didn't get married first. He said, "Okay, let's get married," but a week later he was unsure. I said, "Let's take a break and see what happens." I thought he would know if he wanted to get married or not once we broke up. A couple of months later, I met someone else and got married a year later. He got married a couple of years after that. It all worked out in the end. Story 73. We drifted apart over a few years. I went to Antarctica for a year to work, which caused massive jealousy in him and made him imagine that I was going to meet someone else. I also said I wanted to travel through South America for a year after returning. He did not want to go and was still under the mistaken belief that I was trying to find someone else. His ex-wife had cheated on him. I had never even looked at another man while with him, but he could not overcome his jealousy or thoughts. So we broke up the day before I flew to McMurdo Station. It was difficult, but work was a good distraction. Story 74. I received a few signals from the universe. We planned to be married in the Florida Keys with only our close family attending. Hurricane Wilma struck the area the weekend we were supposed to be there. Our backup plan was to get married in the backyard of the house we were renting. The Friday before the weekend, the Justice of the Peace told me he needed to see a marriage license from the town. However, every municipality was closed in observance of Veterans Day that Friday. We could not obtain the license, so we called off the wedding and needed to regroup. A few months later, we bought a house instead. We broke up a year later. Story 75. Because I realized he was a bad person, and my friends and family did not like how I was being treated. Story 76. She lied about doing her taxes for 5 years and never completed them. I only found out when she became upset about me opening a letter for her from the Internal Revenue Service. I cannot deal with lying like that. I had offered to help her do them for years before that. Who just does not file taxes? Story 77. When he realized my father was not paying for the whole event, he completely lost interest in planning anything. I gently asked, "Do you want to call it off to avoid financial hardship?" His whole face actually lit up at that. He called it off, and I fully left him about a month later. Story 78. Someone I know, now ex-wife, threw a tantrum on the wedding day and almost called off the very expensive wedding that the groom's parents paid for. The reason was that one of the tablecloth colors did not match the others, and the venue was out of cloths of the same color. There was uncertainty all day, but at the last second, she was convinced to go through with it. The marriage lasted about a year. Story 79. As we got closer to the wedding date, she became much more demanding of my time and how I decided to spend it. I dodged a bullet with that one. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.